Eagleburger talked about the problems with doing it now. And they are clear problems. And I think the majority leader's reaction indicated that timing is a very serious problem. So the president needs to make that clear.
Three permanent members of the UN Security Council, Russia, France, China, are against this. It was virtually the same in 1991 during the Bush administration.
Well, they were not against to the extent they have been since then. Now, whether they're against this particular operation, I think we have to wait and see, because there was not a huge outcry when the United States said, if he doesn't comply this time, we'll react without warning.
You mentioned Lawrence Eagleburger's comments a moment ago when he said there are all sorts of problems with the timing. He said it stinks to high heaven or smells to high heaven, something to that effect. But he also went on to say that he thought, given the circumstances, the administration needed to go ahead today. The Allied forces should go ahead today.
I don't know whether they had to do it today, but the fact is that Butler said, UNSCOM can no longer do its job. That was the trigger in the president's own language, that if UNSCOM was not allowed to do its job, we would take matters into our own hands, if you will. He is the commander-in-chief, and he determined that now was the time. And I think that's why, again, the majority leader said he supports the troops.
So are you saying, just one to button this up, General Scowcroft, are you saying that the administration should have waited?
I think it would have been great had there been able to be some better psychological preparation for what was coming. It is unfortunate that it's right up against Ramadan. The relationship of Ramadan and military force is not clear, but it clearly is a complicating factor. And the last is the vote in the House tomorrow.
So you disagree with Prime Minister Tony Blair when he says the position, our position, meaning the British and the U.S. positions, were made crystal clear to the world that this was coming if he didn't comply?
I believe it was made crystal clear it was coming, but I just got back from the Middle East and nobody thought it was coming within a month.
General Scowcroft. At the United Nations, we have been watching things very, very closely. The Security Council went back into its urgent meeting shortly after 3:30 this afternoon. They broke for a period for lunch. They also had some things going on behind the scenes. One of them was the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. He was sitting down with Nizar Hamdoun, Iraq's ambassador to the United Nations, as we watch this live picture just outside the room. And we're told that Ambassador Hamdoun might be making a statement. That's the picture on the left side of your screen. The lower right-hand corner is a live picture from Baghdad. We have been watching what has been happening in that capital ever since the first air raid siren sounded and ever since the anti-aircraft batteries on various rooftops opened fire a short while ago. We are still awaiting a live Oval Office address by President Clinton. He will be speaking to the American people and indeed the world very, very shortly. If you're just joining CNN's worldwide coverage, that is the very latest happening as we report on a military strike against Iraq by United States and British forces. Wolf Blitzer's at the White House.
Bernie, the activity here at the White House, of course, is intense as President Clinton prepares to address the nation within the next few minutes. We do know that the points that he will make will be that he was left with no choice. He will argue that he had to move quickly, given the report that Richard Butler delivered to the United Nations Security Council that Iraq was not complying. We also know that he was bitterly criticized a month ago when at the last minute he aborted a U.S.-led airstrike against Iraq. And one other point that if you take a look at this picture now, this is outside the White House at the corner of 17th and Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. The last few minutes, we've been seeing what appears to be a fire at that corner. And we also heard a lot of fire alarms, fire engines. It's a picture, it's about a block or so away from the White House. And at this point, we're trying to determine what this is all about. But we have no indication to believe at this point it has anything to do with the start of military strikes against Iraq. There are protesters, and you might be hearing them behind me outside the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue in front of the North Lawn. who are condemning this U.S. strike. There's about 20 or 30 protesters. They have megaphones. That's why they're making more noise than probably would be normal, the situation. But once again, you're seeing this live picture about a block or so away from the White House of what appears to be a fire or some sort of activity. And we did hear some strange sounds, but there's a lot of activity here at the White House as well. Two different capitals. You see in the bottom right-hand corner what's happening now in Baghdad, the capital of Iraq. But here in Washington, outside the White House, there's some activities going on as well.
Wolf, we're now back on the live pictures in Baghdad, but for anyone in the audience who's been to the White House, when you show those flashing lights, presumably emergency vehicles, what direction is that in? Some of us are curious.
That's right at the corner of 17th and Pennsylvania Avenue. It looks like they've blocked off traffic completely in that area. There are emergency vehicles that I can see from our regular position here on the north lawn of the White House, where we do these reports very often, and I can see straight ahead, but it's literally right at the corner of 17th and Penn, about a half a block from the Blair House, which is the official residence for foreign visitors here in Washington, right near the old executive office building, which is at the corner of 17th and Pennsylvania. But once again, let me caution our viewers, we have no reason to believe at this point that the activity at this area right near the White House has anything at all to do with what is happening in Iraq right now.
Okay, Wolf, let's put this in perspective by pointing out that we are told now that the fire is in, quote, a vehicle. I don't know whether that means it's a car or a truck, but that's what we're told.
So we'll be getting more information, obviously, and as we do, we'll be making that available. What we do see, though, is the areas blocked off.
Excuse me, sorry, I thought you were
No, go ahead,
finished.
Bernie.
What about the duration of the president's address that's coming up very, very shortly?
It's been in the works basically all day. I traveled with President Clinton to Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank these past few days. And in the middle of that trip, early on, there were indications the president was getting that Richard Butler, the UN weapons inspector chief, was ready to file a very negative report that the Iraqis were not complying, were not allowing the inspectors to get into certain areas, including the Ba'ath political party headquarters in and around Baghdad. And even as President Clinton was engaged in trying to keep the Wye River peace agreement alive, even as he was trying to head off impeachment, he was again forced to be focused very actively, as was his national security advisors, on the situation in Iraq. And when he convened this meeting this morning, the decision was set in concrete. The U.S. would go forward with this strike. We're told they wanted to do it when it would be the middle of the night in Iraq, so that there would be fewer presumed casualties, civilian casualties, from these cruise missiles and perhaps from bombers and other fighter aircraft. But the president's speechwriters have been working on this speech all day. They know it's a very important speech, and one audience will be those critics, including Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott, Representative Gerald Solomon of New York. We heard him on CNN earlier today. Those critics who will say this is simply a, quote, wag the dog scenario, that the president is using this to head off impeachment. Bernie?
Okay.
All right, Wolf, as we see you and we wait for the president to make his statement, it's now about 10 minutes before 6 Eastern time. 8 hours beyond that, I guess getting close to 2 o'clock in the morning there in Baghdad. You're seeing the live pictures from Baghdad. We want to bring in at this moment Hisham Melhem, journalist. Mr. Melhem, tell us what you believe the reaction will be of other governments in the Middle East and the Persian Gulf to this attack.
Well, on the governmental level, there will be reservations definitely expressed publicly. On the popular level, one can say two broad things, that there is a sense of widespread sense of sanction fatigue as well as Saddam fatigue. So any attack that could heighten the suffering of the Iraqi people, if it leads to the destruction of infrastructure, it will not be supported definitely. On the other hand, if people see that the attack is directed solely at the regime, at undermining the regime, hitting the pillars of the regime, and it could really weaken the regime, then you'll probably have a different reaction. And also initially, most people will link the attack to the impeachment proceeding here in Washington, and people say this is not a coincidence. The president is caught between Iraq and a hard place called impeachment, and he's using Iraq to deflate the attention from the impeachment. Whether this is the case or not, this is going to be initially the widespread view throughout the region on the popular level as well as on the governmental level.
Hisham Melhem, journalist with the As-Safir, the newspaper in Lebanon. Hisham Melhem, let me just ask you, what would the alternative be if people are going to criticize this and say that perhaps there was a connection with the impeachment proceedings, the administration, the British shouldn't have done this? What would the alternative be?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you want to do. The problem is that you're dealing with a certain legacy. Last 8 years, there's very little conviction in the Arab world that the Clinton administration is really serious about removing Saddam Hussein from power, notwithstanding the recent tough pronouncements on the part of the president last month. People say this is a reaction to the congressional Republican pressure on him. President Clinton in 1996 did not stand by those Iraqi opposition groups that he said that the United States supports. When he attacked in the past, also after the attempt on President Bush, again, it was pinprick kind of attack. So people say the administration is not serious about